They found the letter tucked beneath the old floorboard, brittle as if it had been hiding for a century, yet the ink shone dark and fresh, like someone had written it yesterday. The first line read, "I was killed before I could speak the truth." That sentence was enough to turn the air heavy, enough to silence even the birds outside the cracked window. Malcolm Price had never planned on coming back to South Carolina. He had left it behind years ago, the sagging porches, the rusted rail tracks, the ghostly cotton fields that whispered the stories of his ancestors. But when his grandmother, Lillian, passed away, he returned out of duty to clear out the old house that smelled of cedar, coffee grounds, and memory. The town had changed little. Faces were older, streets still broken, and history lay on every corner, unspoken but heavy. The letter wasn't the only strange thing he found. Beneath the same floorboard lay a faded photograph. A black man stood proudly in front of a courthouse, wearing a suit too fine for the time, his expression stern and determined. Behind him, white faces blurred, some sneering, some watchful. On the back of the photograph, in his grandmother's handwriting, were 3 words. They never listened. Malcolm's grandmother had never spoken about her youth, never spoken about who their people were beyond the usual stories of resilience. But this discovery felt deliberate, as though she had waited until after her death for him to find it. The letter carried no name, but the photograph hinted at a story that had been buried under silence and shame. The mystery deepened the following morning. As Malcolm walked through town, older folks stopped him, staring long enough to unsettle him. One man at the barber shop muttered, "You look just like him," before quickly shaking his head and refusing to say more. Who was him? Why did they look at Malcolm as though a ghost had walked into their midst? 3 hooks emerged, each pulling him deeper into questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. First, an old court record tucked away in the county archive, stamps denied across every page, involving a man named Isaiah Green, who had tried to testify against the sheriff for the murder of a black boy in 1952. Second, a locked metal box in his grandmother's attic, heavy and cold, with a key nowhere to be found. Third, the sudden appearance of anonymous notes slid under the front door at night, each one warning him, "Stop digging, or you'll end up like him." Malcolm couldn't let it go. He carried within him a gnawing sense of unfinished business. Justice denied in one generation has a way of echoing into the next, and he felt that echo in his bones. He visited the graveyard where Isaiah Green was supposedly buried, only to find no stone, no marker, just an empty patch of earth between 2 crooked headstones. When he asked the caretaker, the man's hands trembled. "Some men don't get graves," he whispered. "They get erased." The locked box tormented him most. 4 days he searched the house until, finally, tucked inside his grandmother's old Bible, he found a small brass key. The box creaked open to reveal stacks of letters, court transcripts, and a diary. The diary belonged to Isaiah Green. His words painted a picture of a man full of fire, who had dared to speak truth when silence was demanded. He had written about the sheriff's cruelty, about children beaten and men vanished in the night. His final entry, written in trembling script, read, "If they kill me, remember I tried. If they bury me in silence, someone must one day speak." Malcolm realized then that his grandmother had been the silent keeper of this legacy. She had hidden the truth to protect her family, but she had trusted him to be the one to carry it forward. The anonymous threats only proved the story's power. Someone still feared Isaiah's truth, even 70 years later. The climax came on a storm-heavy evening when Malcolm was released to the local church by Pastor Henderson, an elder who had known his grandmother. Inside, under the flickering light of candles, Malcolm faced a half-circle of older townsfolk. Their eyes were wary, yet filled with a kind of sorrow. The pastor spoke first. "Your grandmother swore us all to silence. We lived in fear. Isaiah Green was your grandfather, though the town never let his name stand. He was killed on the courthouse steps before he could testify. The sheriff and his men made sure there was no body, no grave, no justice." The truth struck Malcolm with both grief and pride. His grandfather was not a rest. Lived in Malcolm's very blood, in his voice, in his stance. But before Malcolm could respond, the church doors creaked open. A man stepped inside, younger, with the same sharp jawline Malcolm had seen in the old photograph. He introduced himself as Daniel Green, the great-grandson of the very sheriff who had ordered Isaiah's death. The final twist shattered the room. Daniel revealed he had been the one leaving notes at the house not to threaten, but to test. He had found in his family's hidden papers the confessions of cruelty, the truth his ancestors had buried, and unlike them, he wanted it unearthed. Blood runs deep, Daniel said, his voice breaking, but it doesn't have to carry the same sins. My great-grandfather tried to bury your grandfather's voice. I'm here to help restore it. In that moment, the weight of history shifted. Two men, bound by bloodlines on opposite sides of injustice, stood in the same space with the power to either repeat silence or break it. The room swelled with something larger than grief, dignity, courage, and a hard-won sense of resolution. The town would never be the same after that night. Malcolm knew there would be resistance, denial, and even hatred. But the truth had surfaced, and the silence that had kept generations bowed could no longer hold. His grandmother's hidden legacy was no longer a secret, it was a torch. As Malcolm left the church, the storm broke, rain washing over the streets like baptism. He looked at the courthouse steps in the distance and imagined Isaiah standing tall, unbroken, even in death. For the first time, Malcolm understood that he was not just clearing out an old house, he was clearing out a wound that had festered for decades. The letter that began it all echoed in his mind. I was killed before I could speak the truth, Malcolm whispered into the night. Steady and certain, then I'll speak it for you. And somewhere in the hush after the rain, it felt as though Isaiah finally answered.